Hey everyone, I am Russ Frushtick from Polygon. I am joined by Steve and Carla from Fullbright. Welcome, guys.
Hey, how's it going?
We have a game here.
Ooh.
You guys made a game a couple years ago that people kind of liked. Well received, I would say. And now it seems you have a new game.
I would say that there were some websites that gave it Game of the Year.
Really? Some
weird,
websites?
Yeah, some kind of website.
What website could that be?
I don't know, but thank you for having us on to show Tacoma.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I guess for people that aren't familiar with it, and maybe we'll just like start jumping into the gameplay just as a background thing. But what's sort of the elevator pitch? What's the idea here?
Well, so we worked on Gone Home together, and so if you've played Gone Home, you know it's a story exploration game, a first-person kind of narrative game, and Tacoma is kind of our next step forward in that kind of game. It takes place on a space station in the year 2088. And you've been sent there to retrieve the station AI by the company that owns the facility. And so while you're here exploring, you're discovering more about who the crew was and what happened to them through the digital evidence and physical evidence that they left behind.
So in my history, I feel like looking at sci-fi AI, it generally is like very calm, very hopeful. Nothing goes wrong with AI.
Sure, yeah.
Everything's great.
Well, they're friends.
Yes,
they're
of course.
Friends.
Yes.
There are
You
computer
wanna hang out
friends.
with. Yeah.
Can you guys talk a bit about like why you decided? I mean, this is obviously from a setting perspective a huge departure from Gone Home. Like, why the like massive genre shift for you guys?
Well, you know, you gotta keep it interesting for yourself when you're working on these things. We considered in the past being like, what if we made a different house in a different time period and different people? And I don't know. I think we needed a bigger departure to really sink our teeth into it. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing about the setting in Gone Home was that the setting didn't come first. Aside from it taking place in a house was sort of like our starting point, but it being in the 90s and it being, you know, the specific family that it was and stuff, that all kind of came later.
Yeah.
And for us, the time period was an answer to a design problem, right? Where we're like, we want this to be a game all about finding the story in the environment. And if it takes place late, you know, like in present day, it's all going to happen in people's emails and in their cell phones. And so, you know, that was what led us to the setting for Gone Home. And then we wanted to not be able to rely on those solved problems. And so with Tacoma, wait for it.
Oh no!
Gravity.
Yes, please.
It's possible.
Oh no, it's off. I think.
Come on!
Got it short.
Oh, garbage.
But so for now that we had made a game that way, we were like, we need to have like different problems to solve.
Sure.
And so we kind of, the opposite direction for us was to say, if it's set in, there you go,
Nice.
a very high-tech setting that's all about digital information, then it's going to give us kind of new things to do design-wise, and force us to, I guess, think about what we're making differently than just like, let's do that again.
Yeah.
You know, aside from like the surface, like we actually have to build something differently. For instance, you know, we're in the zero G part of the station now. And we just got a notification to open Amy's AR desktop. So a big part of Tacoma is, you know, it's a high-tech facility. It's in orbit between Earth and the Moon. And in our version of the year 2088, a lot of what the experience is about is people using this augmented reality technology just kind of as part of their everyday lives. So, you know, you see it in the environment as like, you know, signs and interfaces, but also all of the characters, including Amy, have access to this AR desktop. That is kind of their way of, you know, their version of what we do with smartphones now, you know, sending information, checking on things. And so these are all these kind of different layers of information about who these people were and what experiences they were having that you're accessing through the station's technology. And so that includes that the incident that caused the crew to be evacuated means that a lot of the data on the station was lost. You're recovering it as you go. And that includes these 3D recordings that the station's tracking systems captured.
Sort of like a surveillance system.
Right.
Yeah.
Very much like that.
Yeah. And so you're being, you know, by the corporation, you're being given access to information you wouldn't normally, you know, have as an individual. But since you're and basically a contracting engineer, you're able to recover these kind of snapshots of things that happened before you arrived. And so it's another aspect of kind of being in the space with these characters while the moments were happening, and having that build up your understanding of, you know, what really happened here, and why you've been sent here.
So is that sort of a solve? Obviously, one of the things that drew people to Gone Home was the relatability nature of it, and like people can sort of jive with that. But obviously, when you're talking about a space station, typically what you're doing, you know, you're reading computers and emails and stuff like that, and every once in a while you'll see like fun little interpersonal stuff, but for the most part it can be very dry. So is this sort of a solve to make you feel like, oh, I'm like in this more living world?
Well, I mean, we definitely want to, like, a major part of this is, like, it is a pretty strange environment for most of us, but, like, you know, people are still people, and they relate to each other and communicate and, like, have thoughts that we would recognize and stuff, and so we are definitely, part of our, you know, part of what we're really excited about in this is trying to keep it grounded, and, you know, how would people actually relate to this, being in this kind of situation, and how would they, you know, they're trapped here with, like, with this crew, you know, and it's like having a bunch of roommates. You can't leave the house. But,
there's these 6 people that are stationed here for, you know, more than a year at a time, and so, you know, it has to be about how they relate to each other and how they rely on each other. And, you know, some of the things that have really inspired us is we worked on the BioShock series together, and the things about games like System Shock 2 and about movies like Alien that are really exciting to us are the parts where you are like, oh, okay, these are, you know, people that live in this weird space. There's this, like, recognizability to, this is like an artificial environment. It's totally different from, you know, a place that any of us have actually been, but people are familiar. You know, like, people adapt, and people are still people wherever they are, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so really focusing on that and giving you access to that as the player is our kind of number one concern.
Absolutely. How would you say? I'm guessing there's some light puzzle solving elements in this game. How does that sort of jibe with what you guys did with some of the smaller puzzles in Gone Home?
I mean, I think the farthest we go with, like, puzzles is something like, oh, this door is locked. How am I going to find the thing to unlock it? How am I going to find the key code or whatever? For us, how do I put this? So I'm a level designer, you know, by trade, as far as, like, what I've been on, larger projects I've been on. And for us, we do have, like, some, like, you know, gating in the, like, you can't go here until you find this thing or whatever. But for us, it's really more about, like, staging out the information and making it, like, interesting to find things in different orders and being like, oh, I have to come back here. Oh, now I can go in there. You know, that kind of satisfaction that you get, as opposed to, here's a cool puzzle that's, like, fun to solve for puzzles' sake. But it all is kind of in the interest of giving players access to all of the details in the game, you know. And so hopefully, if you're like, because the game is about, you know, finding everything if you're interested in finding everything. And hopefully part of that is satisfying is maybe, you know, when you first encounter something, you can't get all of it, and then, oh, now I can go in there, now I can kind of have a fuller picture of what this is all, you know, really about. And so, you know, I think that for us, the entire, how do I put this? The story is the puzzle for us. You know what I mean? Where it's like, you're fine. Like, right now, we're watching this scene between Nat and Bert, but we can see that we're in this central space in the admin wing, and Sarah is down here, and Evie, the station admin, is in the conference room, and you're kind of surrounded by all these different threads of story. And so if you've observed this part, we know what's happening here. But since this is a digital recording, and you're kind of in the station's systems, you can see the timeline at the bottom. You're able to move back through the scene, or move forward through the scene if you're, you know, going towards the later part of, you've already seen something and you want to see what happens after it. And you can, you know, see this section from a different angle, and kind of get that context of, okay, well, now we're with Andrew and Clive, and we know what was going on here. Now let's see what's going on here. And within this scene, you know, we are examining, you know, the objects that are in front of them, and hearing what they're saying. But also, you just saw that Clive had his personal AR desktop out, during this section, and you can recover that data, and then you're seeing what they were seeing on their desktop, and at that point it kind of gives you this context for, well, here's information that only Clive had, here's what he was seeing in his vision while this exchange was going on, and it's all about adding up to that puzzle, you know, of like what was the full kind of understanding of what was happening in this place, kind of from all angles.
Interesting. The encrypted bits were, is that stuff that would get filled out, or is that just like data that's lost?
That's lost.
Okay.
Yeah, this is there's definitely been some data loss on this station, and so only certain pieces are actually recoverable. So that's part of the challenge of trying to fill in the gaps. You know.
Totally. And these sort of centerpieces, if you will, where you have all the characters within a central space, these are kind of like, would you consider these like tentpole moments within your game arc?
I mean, I would like really this is an introduction to your role in the game. Like, so the game is centered around these 6 characters on the station, and there's different habitable sections that you'll visit, and in each of the major habitable sections there's one of these like large interconnected scenes that you're kind of existing within and moving through, and so you're kind of at this point seeing the structure of how you're going to relate to what you're finding in the game. And so, you know, yes, they are like crucial in terms of, you know, it is what the game is about, but they are also not sort of like, oh, you occasionally find one of these. It's like every section is going to be based on the events that happened there, and this is how.
You just want to show off your physics editor at this point.
Well, we're excited about this. You might be as well. It's good.
Yes.
Oh, whoop. I scratched it on the play.
Oh, no. That's end of game, right? It just ends right there?
Game. Worst.
But, you know, like, that's a big part of what we do as well, is that, you know, like, in Gone Home, you could pick up every object and open every cabinet.
Is there a duck here?
Wow, spoilers.
Duck spoilers. Damn.
But, you know, like, because we are kind of really invested in being able to touch the world and like interact with it, we also want to say, like, you can see a character doing this out of the other thing, where you see them kind of how they spend their time, and then since you're there in physical space, you can, you know, engage with
take that, Sergio.
Well. Yeah,
exactly.
Jerk. See, he gets it.
Right in the face.
I think it's pretty clear.
Right in the haircut.
Yeah. Oh man, that haircut
part that hair.
It.
But yeah.
Do you think people will be finishing this game in 12 seconds or whatever the speed run is for Gone Home?
That was very specific to how Gone Home is structured.
Yes.
In this case, we do not have a, if you know how to do it, you just through it. It's sort of the opposite in some ways. But the structure of how the game is built, you know, and how the player moves through it is very different.
Sure.
And it's interesting because, you know, a house, a Victorian house is like a very interconnected space. You know, it's like one big knot of rooms that you're moving through, and on Tacoma, because you have the central hub, and then you have these arms that are rotating to simulate gravity in the habitable sections, you move through it in kind of like a much more deliberate sense. And so it's about kind of fully, you know, like non-linearly finding everything that you're interested in one of these areas, and kind of making a full picture of that, and then moving on and kind of like building.
So it's a little more traditional, like, again, in the style of like a BioShock, if you will, which was very level based, and less about like backtracking and constantly seeing where you've been, because again, like theoretically nothing has changed in those other places because everything is gone and static. Well,
it's this interesting this interesting kind of paradigm that we're in, where it even like is sort of weird sometimes for us as developers, because you're really existing in multiple times at once, conceptually. And so right now, you know, we're observing Evie, and she's kind of moving in real time, and we can move back and forth through her timeline. But then sometimes I'm playing and I'm like, oh, I just missed the sun going by. I'm going to rewind it so I can have... Oh, wait, no. The physical world is like the place that I actually am. And then these events are what I can move through.
It's kind of that VR to real world dichotomy that you get when you take the helmet off. So like the cat isn't here right now. You can't actually pet it.
well, we really
that might be 2 points off your score right
yeah, because what we really focus on is that kind of that tragic feeling of loss in our games, you know, and so that feeling of like there was a cat here, and it's so we're really trying to make that connection, you know what I mean?
So Gone Home obviously touched on like a number of genres, but certainly for a chunk of it started feeling like almost a horror game or a thriller, if you will, as you're sort of uncovering the past and getting very tense and freaked out. Do you feel like this is similar in tone and builds something similar to that, or do you think this is more like an investigative, like just learning the story?
I don't know. I mean, what do you think, Carla?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, we can't really tell.
Sure. I mean, that's fine.
Well, I think it's on some level, I think it's hard for us to know what it's going to feel like when it comes out.
Yeah.
Like for me, I never thought of Gone Home as, you know, being a scary game.
Well, because you know
the whole, it's there, right?
But you also have to admit you built the game with those hooks in mind.
Definitely.
There's some amount of like tension that you want to evoke, but that varies a lot per person.
Sure.
Like where that tension spills over into get that away from me. Turn off this video game right now. You know.
Yeah.
Right.
So like it's kind of a personal thing.
Sure.
And like you want that kind of like urgency and tension. But ideally, you know, you're not having explosions go off and
totally
terrify them.
Right. Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think that because for me, it's like it is one of those things where there are these aspects to it, like you were saying, of like, well, it's about an abandoned space station where something went wrong, there's an AI involved and all that kind of stuff, and so like sort of almost academically, I know that there's that underlying, like, okay, all those things
these are tropes that we're familiar with, sure.
These are like signifiers that, but when I'm playing it, I'm like, well, it doesn't seem like freaky, you know?
Right.
But like, if you have no context, maybe you are in this place and it's like just really kind of like tense to be in this abandoned facility. So I'm gonna be interested to see what players' reaction to it ends up being, frankly, because like it's always so hard to know.
Yeah, for sure.
So we're in this room and we're with Evie, and this is the point in the story. So we're early in the game. This is
there was an explosion.
Yeah, distant explosion. So at this point in the game, we're kind of we've stepped into kind of the end of Act 1, sort of narratively, and so we're at this point where Amy has been sent here to do a job, right? She's here to recover data for her employer, but while you're here, you've only been given like need to know levels of information before you arrived, and so a lot of what you're finding out about is like, okay, well, why was the crew evacuated, and what were the circumstances of that, and what really happened to them, and so we're at this point where we're learning, okay, here's the thing that happened. And this is kind of our starting off point from going from normalcy and just finding out who these people are to like, well, here's what they had to deal with and what was the identity kind of of the events that led to you being called in the first place.
So an alien hasn't burst out of anyone's chest, but certainly something has gone awry.
Right, yeah. And
do you guys look to like? I mean, these are classic movies, but like Alien, the first half hour of Alien, obviously has to inform this stuff. Yeah,
for real. Like there is something really compelling about all those like regular people like sitting around a table and like chit chatting and all their like slightly different walks of life and stuff, trying to relate to each other. That's a big.
Have you guys seen the clip that they just released of the first like intro sequence of the new Alien movie?
No,
it's like it's just that. There's no tension. It's just like people hanging around drinking.
I love that.
Yeah, it's great. It's really cool. Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, I know what I'm watching immediately after this stream.
That sounds super good.
But like to that point, like we're talking about the plot here, and like a big part of what you're finding is like, okay, what happened?
Yeah.
But the other aspect of the games that we make, and the reason that we care about this stuff is like you were talking about, just like getting to know the characters as characters.
Sure.
And so the other aspect of the kind of like AR, recording system is that you will also find these kinds of bits and these fragments of moments that might have happened kind of like off the beaten track. So we're in the station administrator's personal bunk right now. And something I think is really powerful about the AR system is that it allows us to kind of like share these quiet moments with these characters in a way that you're present for it and you have kind of, you know, access to all the details of you know, their personal space without it either literally just being like, okay, we're watching you know, surveillance video of it, or being in the room with them, because then your presence is like part of their experience. And here you can be a totally, you know, an active observer without actually. It's sort of what's the scientific theory of observing something changes it.
Oh right.
Yeah.
You can actually observe these moments without impacting them.
Sure.
So
Exactly.
you have access to moments that, you know, really only these characters normally would, and give you a fuller view of just like who they are. Outside of the plot, outside of their role.
Sure. Where did you guys start in terms of this story? Did you kind of figure out the end and then work backwards, or did you come up with this cast of characters and then figure out a way to sort of make them engaging to people? Like, where did it kind of grow from?
It was a weird process for us this time.
Yeah, it was a little circuitous.
Yeah. What you might have gathered was we've been working on this game for a while, and we had a kind of big rethink of some of the core stuff that we're doing, maybe like a year and a half ago, something like that.
Sure.
And so with where we're at now, the stuff that stayed the same is the characters, the setting, the overall like paradigm of what's happening, but all the plot events changed, all of the spaces changed, and like how the station was built changed, right? And so it's very different from Gone Home or something for us, because with Gone Home we were like, okay, there's a house, who's the people in the house, here's the family, what happened to them, and we were kind of
it was all very changed,
developing that as as we went, and in this we kind of established a lot of the fiction and character stuff, and then we were like, oh, but the game itself is very different now, and that, like, for us, the design and like what the player is doing comes first, and so if what the player is doing changes, the story has to change,
of course,
because the story is based on that, as opposed to what you do being based on the story. And so all the events and kind of the stuff that happens to these people changed a lot relatively recently in the development process.
Wow.
I mean, relatively.
Sure.
But it's been really, really interesting. I'm going to run a little bit more and show some other stuff that we didn't see the first time.
Yeah.
Because the cool thing for us is something that we really wanted to be able to do is, you know, in Gone Home, because the story moments are like audio diaries. Yeah. You are purely, you know, kind of visualizing what Sam's experience was through that, and like that's cool. And obviously, that's like what we wanted to. That was our inspiration in the first place. Was like audio diaries in, you know, the BioShock games and other games like that can be super effective. Let's focus on it. But in Tacoma, we wanted to say like, can we have performance on screen? Can we have you actually, you know, like share the space with the characters in a way that we haven't before?
Sure.
And something that's really cool about that is, you know, you might have like noticed the. I mean, I'm sure that you've been listening to the voice performance of the characters, and something it gave us an opportunity to do was the way we recorded it is we actually recorded all of these scenes ensemble style with the entire cast, like on a soundstage.
Yeah, okay.
And it's not mocap. Yeah. It's not like, you know, captured and cleaned up. Our animator Noelle is actually like it's all hand animated characters because they're sort of abstracted. Right. They're very like kind of
much easier
impressionistic characters.
To match. So. You're not trying to recreate necessarily the physical performance, really just the body positioning and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, it's more. It's like there's details that she can put in that are the important details, rather than having everything.
It's a much more focused thing.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is all of these scenes are so directly tied to the game environment.
Yes.
That doing mocap We would have had to like.
Yeah. Well, here's our space station.
Let's build each of these things.
Yeah, that would have been a drag. You guys don't have a mocap studio in your office?
No, not
well,
right now.
It's not shaped like this.
Yes.
Yeah.
A little different.
But when you're in one of these scenes, the really cool experience for us was having all of these actors together and they're performing these lines, face to face. Or in a case like this, the actors actually were near each other when they were performing this part of the scene, and then they walked across the soundstage from each other because there's this aspect of like just naturally modulating your voice and how you relate to people by like being face to face with them or being
distance,
right here or being on the other side of the room.
Right. And that gets lost when if you just record one person's lines in a sound studio in a booth closed up and then play them back for the next person. Like they just don't have the cues, the like visual cues and spatial cues.
Well, and there's also a physicality to it where there's you actually do sound different if you're like crouching down or carrying something heavy or like looking back over your shoulder. Like you can hear me like sound different, like twist my neck and stuff like that. And you don't necessarily have that in the booth. But if two people are just like in the space together, or 4 or 6 people are in the space together, it naturally comes through.
Did you guys use traditional voice actors, like people that are like core voice acting people?
Some are voice, like primarily. Some are TV. So like Clive's actor has been in the Uncharted games and was on 24, and he's kind of a screen performer.
Sure.
TJ Ramini. And the voice actor who plays Evie she was on the Cosby Show spinoff, A Different World.
Oh, okay, sure.
But like since then, she started doing a lot of voice. She was a voice in Futurama for a bunch of years.
Oh, no kidding.
So there's this mix of people who are more stage or screen or voice, but they all kind of have this background of having done a lot of like ensemble performance like that.
How long did you guys record for?
It was just 2 days.
Oh, wow.
It was 2 4-hour sessions.
They were solid days.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And they, it's interesting working with actors and working within, the idea of like, the union constraints and stuff. Because like, even if we had wanted to do like more than 4 hours a day, it's a restriction that, you have to just do. But like the thing is, that's good because the 4 hours a day are exhausting.
Sure.
Like we're just like,
it's
obliterated after 4 hours of doing that, and so like spreading it out over 2 days is actually a really good thing.
But I mean, part of why we were able to fit into those slots was just because we got stuff on early takes like really often because people were able to directly react to each other.
Sure.
So you didn't have to like make sure they got the tone.
Do that read again and stuff like that.
They could just feel the tone like once they got there, they stayed there. So like, it was actually kind of like efficient in a lot of ways.
And then there are, there's a couple of characters who are purely voice. Odin is specifically, Odin is like in all of the scenes, but he's explicitly not supposed to be physically there. So he was the one actor that we did in a booth, and we in fact like we tried to give him as little context as possible in a lot of cases because Odin, like a lot of AIs, like Odin he has kind of more of a sense of humanity in a way than some AIs, but he still has kind of a disconnection
from the
naturalness of...
he's not exactly the same as a person character.
For sure.
And so having him be physically removed from the rest of the actors was totally appropriate in that case. So we wanted to...
What was he looking at a visual reference while he was doing this stuff, or no, nothing?
But we've worked with him before. So Carla and I was the lead designer and writer of Minerva's Den, the Bioshock 2 DLC, and Carla was my story editor and was a 2D artist on that. And we worked with Carl Lumbly, who is the voice of Porter in that, and Carl is playing...
Oh, yeah, amazing.
And Carl is the voice of Odin in Tacoma.
He's a hell of a voice actor.
He's also one of those guys who are like, okay, we know you're going to nail it. Your voice is amazing.
Anything you say is terrific.
There are organizations that share.
Totally.
So we weren't exactly worried.
And we're really excited to get to work with him again.
For real.
Because he's just so great. And the other character that is voice only, you don't hear her in this part of the game, but in some parts of the game, Amy, the player character, talks.
Sure.
And she's played by Sarah Grayson, who is the voice of Sam in Gone Home. So getting to have like getting to have the main voices.
She jumped into a time machine, and now she's here.
But getting to kind of like bring those talents together into like, you know, we made one, then the other, this is our third thing, and being able to like have them both there as part of it is just a cool experience.
Totally.
Yeah.
What about the cat?
The cat hasn't actually been cast yet. It will be one of our cats.
Okay, I think that's a good idea.
But we're gonna have to.
Hopefully, they're amenable, very cooperative.
We're gonna have to have some sort of game or contest in the studio to see whose cat gets to scream into a microphone for the game.
Nice.
But yeah.
Game looks absolutely wicked. I think people are very excited. So you're saying this summer at some point is what
right now we're aiming for the middle of the year. We're not far off, but we don't have an exact release date yet.
Yeah. Okay. Well, very exciting. And platforms. Where can people play this?
So it'll be out later in 2017 on Xbox One and PC.
And PC. Very exciting. Thank you guys so much for coming by.
Absolutely.
Thank you for
Very wicked.
Very wicked.
I don't want to see anything else. We're just going to cut off.
More open to such exchanges than others.
I think some people were just raised to be less guarded or to trust people more. AIs are the same way, right? They're raised differently from each other?
Yes. We are each uniquely evolved, individualized entities.
Yes, individuals. Do you get along with other